Hello, I'm Marilyn Hawes with Unprecedented TV for my show Heart and Soul, and you will find us on YouTube. I'm also CEO of Freedom from Abuse, which is a charity seeking to prevent abuse, any abuse actually, that there's far too much of in society by, educating people for what to spot in people's behaviours. Anyway, for Heart and Soul, I'm inviting anyone with a lived experience or an interesting profession or anything that, maybe it's something that you never had a chance to discuss. And if you have not heard from me and you'd like to be on the show, then please contact Unprecedented TV and come on and have a chat. So today and together, we always discuss issues very often from what people will turn away from, and because they don't really want to understand, they'd rather ignore other people's reality. I just think some of these things need to be given oxygen to make people maybe think a little bit differently. So we're going to kick the elephant out of the room. That's what we try and do about things that people don't want to discuss, and yet some of these issues are all around us, an elbow nudge away. So today I am going to welcome, here he comes. And this is Troy. Hello, Troy. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hi, good morning.
You're sat there with a wonderful tan. Look at him. And I can tell you why, because that's because I think he's just come back from Nepal. Now, it's fair to say it's an unusual show today, but I'm really pleased that Troy has come on to talk about what he's doing globally around the world to try and change minds and hearts and souls and all the rest of it. Before we get going, Troy, I will just say to people, don't want to mess with him. He's got a military background, so he's a tough. So I know I've called you Sam, but you sometimes change your name, don't you, to Ben or Troy? Sorry, I call you Troy, but that you also use other names, don't you? Sam, Bob, Bill, Rich, anyone for that matter. So why so many names?
So I'm now the founder of an organization that specializes in providing answers to suicide ideation, in particular catastrophic suicide ideation in military and first responders. And the concept came up initially with the ability for somebody struggling with mental ill health to be able to go into a cafe or a restaurant, identify themselves with a name such as Ben, for example. That was the first one, when actually their name isn't Ben. So they can go in and say, hi, my name's not Ben, and I need to make use of the facilities here. And then for that restaurant or that supermarket or whatever to then be able to provide not just a safe space, but also a smile, a cup of tea, and the provision of equipment so that they can then search for immediate assistant help and also long-term support. So that then generated a whole range of other knots. Not Sam represents UK Fire and Rescue, or in fact, any fire and rescue. Not Ben became the name that we use for men in the UK. Not Sarah became the name for women in the UK. And then all of the other names that we give represent a specific subsection. So, for example, for ex-UK military, we refer to as not Tom for the Army and not Matt for the Navy, for example. Each has a link. So Fireman Sam, hence not Sam. And so it just means then that we're able to use those names seamlessly. And also it works very, very well for my time when I'm traveling all the time. It's just easier to remember Sam than Troy. I actually prefer the name Sam as well. So that's a nice win. But in Nepal, it's actually...
I think that's a great idea. I mean, so not Gurung, G-U-R-U-N-G. That is what? Sorry, that is, what does that mean again? Not Gurung.
Meron napali nam Sam not Gurung ho. So the point is I worked with the Gurkhas in the military for a while, and they really inspired my life choices and decisions. And so for me to be able to go to Nepal now and help contribute towards a number of things in Nepal, including trying to reduce suicide, which is a significant issue in Nepal, often misunderstood. I just took the Nepali name Sam not Gurung. It works really, really well. And Sam itself Sham is actually a Nepalese name. So it's a way of...
hold you there for a minute, because I find that quite interesting. Why number one, two things. Why Nepal? I mean, I know it looks, I've seen photographs of it. It looks awesome. But how did that come to be? And the second question loaded into that would be, why is suicide so great over there?
So first of all, why Nepal specifically? Well, I was actually on my way transiting over to New Zealand and Australia at the time. I'd just come back from a suicide prevention course over in America, which I was actually a participant of. And it really inspired me to go over and do the work that I'd sort of had loosely in my mind around suicide prevention for veterans. And a friend of mine who's currently serving Gurkha, who I also served with in Afghanistan and in my military background, was passing through. And so I said, well, I'll come and visit you. And they told me about some of the issues that they had, not just suicide, actually. It was more around other things, including fire safety and safety messaging, which is a big part of my time in the fire sector in the UK was also that. And so I said, well, I can do some good here. So I went to see him, and after seeing him, I decided to go and spend some time traveling around Nepal. I always wanted to see it and hadn't made it up until this point. And so very quickly after hitting the road and spending time in Nepal, actually I decided I would take the time to work on some of the projects I had back in the UK. But things just progressed so well that I decided to stay there and continue. And that's now put us in touch with a whole range of things, including sustainable tourism, first aid. We've actually launched a new district-wide first aid course and accreditation, which provides joint service response from not just emergency services, but also members of the public as well. So we're doing some really cool stuff there now. And then
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm picking up on this as well. When you say about the fire, so you were am I right? Were you a fireman?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, just shy of 7 years. I was in UK Fire Rescue.
After being in the military or prior?
Right. No, that's right. So I did 10 years in the military, and I moved around a bit during that time, and then I then spent a short period of time out traveling, taking a gap year, as we like to call, and then I joined the fire sector and spent 6.5, 7 years there.
Oh my goodness! I mean, I think do you know that for me would be, if that would be my absolute worst nightmare, being stuck. I'm always like, I tend to sort of salute fire engines when I see them going nina nina. To actually go into something like when it was the Twin Towers explosion and all of that, you know, I mean, to walk into something like that with that toxic smoke and the heat of the flames, and finding myself trapped in a room and I could not get out or be rescued from. That to me is my idea of hell. Knowing you're going to die, and you know, and suffocating. It must be horrendous. And I mean, you must have seen some terrible things in your time, absolutely dreadful things in your time. And I'm not surprised that, you know, your own mental health suffered, because there must be such tragic incidents where people don't come out.
Well, first of all, I appreciate you recognising the toxic smoke inhalation. You know, that is a considerable challenge, not just for firefighters, but also for their families when they go back home and they're contaminated with that. There's also a real need for modernisation of the fire sector, not just in the UK, but yeah, that's another area that I'm particularly interested in. The way I like to put it, as I was immensely proud to be a fireman and a firefighter, I actually found a little bit of a lack of pride in working within that specific area, as in county or arguably UK Fire Rescue, because my personal experience and my beliefs in it. And now I'm incredibly proud to now work on behalf of UK Fire and Rescue. I do not have a loyalty to one particular county, and my efforts now go across boundaries of counties and really benefit and affect a national fire and rescue and safety messaging. So, for example, with the Nepalese community, it does not matter to me whether you're in Kent, Berkshire, Scotland, it's irrelevant. We tailor now, through one of the organisations that I have generated, safety messaging for all people with that background, and it's actually written in their language and in different dialects in time, so we can finally bring home fire safety messaging that is culturally appropriate and culturally aware. And then you also mentioned there,
what is it about fire that's so, if you like, difficult, troublesome, not quite right about the fire rescue then? What do you, because I think you do a great job, all of you. I think it's amazing.
I would say, like everything, it would seem in the UK, recruitment, retention, and training is a challenge. Pay is never as good as it really, frankly, should be. The working conditions, the provision of kit and equipment is pretty good these days, and yet there still is a very well-known systemic problem with women not being given clothing that actually fits them, in particular day-to-day working wear. These things just simply, there is just no valid excuse for it. That in itself, you know, is a great example of where we just simply say that we provide care and support, and we really just don't. Another example is the mental health and welfare facilities. You mentioned about the suicide ideation within Nepal, and we can come back to that, of course. And also you mentioned about the mental health challenges of being in the fire service, and, you know, shout out to the fire and rescue community, you know, because we all say the same, you know, it's pretty bad in a house fire, but you should have seen the bathroom this morning when we woke up and see what the state of that place was like. And the point is you know, it's what we do. It's our reason for being. It's our purpose. It's why we join. It's why we train. And actually, one of the biggest psychological challenges, I would strongly argue and suggest, and would put out there to anyone that agrees and or disagrees with this to get in contact, is that actually the long-term commitment of firefighters and people joining the service to go and do good, to then discover that actually the amount of time, not just that they're helping people, but actually training to help people, the lack of really good training and the provision of good training, the lack of it, has more of a significant adverse effect on mental health. As well as that, we find there's a lot of packages of care and provision for people, and frankly, they just don't really provide a solution that's tailored to fire and rescue. And so that's where my work now in that area is, you know, a real passion for me, and also where I now actually link up. And I know you've had Rachel on your show from the TRB, but that's where the link there to the TRB kind of really established.
Well, I would just explain to people listening, TRB is Trauma Related Board, and Rachel Fairhurst Rachel's already been on one of my shows talking about early year trauma, and she introduced us to, didn't she? And then she's yet to come on, because I really want to go and do a deep dive on the mind of a paedophile, and which she understands the makeup of the brain and all the different the clusters that form. I mean, I just think it's going to be, because what you're doing when you say you can go into a bar and you say, oh, not so and so, and that means, you know, don't they have this now? We have something in the ladies' toilets that goes on the back, and if you're being pestered by a championship bar or a nightclub, I can't remember what you ask Angela, is it?
Ask Angela, yeah. And there's a number of those actually, and I now actually work in a number of other areas as well. Some we won't disclose on this call, and that's all about helping individuals who are in vulnerable positions. And there's a number of these, and that's a good thing. Not Sam, it's about providing a safe space and refuge, as well as immediate assistance with already established mental health organizations, and including things like Alcohol Anonymous and those sorts of things. That's what we're building. That's what we're gearing up towards. And hey, it's going to take us some time before we can really roll this out. That's why we don't have the social media presence, because it takes time to put this stuff in place. But at the same time, it is world leading. There's nothing else like it. And if anyone says, well, you know, these organizations don't currently facilitate encouraging positive mental health or helping in people who are in particular high risk suicide ideation in military veterans and first responders, well, sorry, but that's the way it's been for the last 20 years. You know, these guys have had the time. Some organizations, the Firefighters Charity, for example, is a phenomenal charity, very, very well regarded within the fire sector. Some charities, like military ones, no names to be given, aren't doing a very good job at all, and yet they take huge amounts of money. And this is not a money problem. You know, 120 billion pounds a year is spent by the NHS on providing what is a attempt to stop a hemorrhage of mental health challenges, including suicide.
The thing is, Troy, all the NHS wants to do is put a plaster on it. And you can't just put a plaster on something. You've got to give it time. You have NHS counselling. I mean, I've had all sorts of different therapists over the years after what happened to my children. And your NHS counselling, you're lucky if you get 12 weeks. Well, you know, somebody that's now looking down that dark pit of suicide, it's going to take more than 12 weeks to, you know, peel the layers back and try and find a way through. I mean, what do you do? So you start talking to these people, and you recognize that they come to you, and you maybe spot somebody that's struggling. What do you offer them? A task or something they could do to help improve themselves, or is it just having a cup of tea and a chat?
So we're having to build a whole holistic approach and actually, you know, a whole ecosystem for this. And what actually we've ended up doing is not building one, but actually building at least three. We work off three at the moment around how we can provide a full wraparound care package. In the first instance, the only people that know about this are those that hear about it through word of mouth. And we only operate on a word of mouth, person to person link. But because of my military links, that puts us into fire and rescue sector across the country and arguably the globe. I mean, that's my work now. And then also across the military. And again, in certain areas of linked often to my background, in particular, Commando, Airborne Forces. And then on a national level within Nepal, that's a big part of what we do as well. It's all about, you know, that old cliche of prevention is very much at the forefront of what we do. So, for example, we're the first organization to roll out a multi-agency, civilian and first responder, first aid, trauma and casualty stabilization course. And embedded in that course is, from the very start, talk about how we can identify, reduce, prevent and measure and manage trauma from an incident. This is inspired by experiences in the fire sector in the UK, but now it's already gone global and people recognize the importance for this. So it's all prevention stuff. And then as well as that, through the human to human links that people have directly to myself at this time, in order just to put some control measures in place, basically we are able to now identify high-risk individuals or indeed anybody that's talking about suicide ideation. My turnaround time, if I get a phone call from one of those links, is less than 5 minutes, is the aim time. My time on the phone is usually less than 10 minutes. And all that is really is an opportunity to make a connection, share with the individual what it is that is available if they fall within that category, and for us to kind of identify and categorize how at risk somebody is from either self-harm or harming another.
It's I mean, I can imagine as well. I mean, the military that came out of when they were like getting people out of Afghanistan and some of the conditions. But then you think, you know, you go back to like my uncles. I go back to when I was a child. My uncles have been in when they were all called up, you know, to be in the military during the war, and what they must have seen in the trenches. And there was no one like you around, and they had to come back after 3 or 4 years away and come back to be a husband and a father. It's no wonder they struggled, because you see things you can't unsee, don't you? You can't. I mean, and they're pretty horrific and gory. And how do you get that out of your brain? I remember working with someone who had been in Japan. He was a prisoner of war in Japan, and the starvation and everything, the lack of food. He was about 6'3" and ever so skinny, and it just massively impacted his digestive tract. And he would never, if you'd say, "Oh, I saw a war film last night," he'd be gone, you know, run for the hills. Never wanted to talk about it. So I think all that is deep down trauma that's still locked in there, isn't it? And it does impact if you don't get it out your system.
Yeah, I mean, there's a range of things there. First of all, I agree. You know, these things and war, of course, is a horrendous thing to see. However, one of the most significant reasons for trauma is not the physical act of seeing the death, the destruction, and the bloodshed. It's actually there's a much more significant cause of that, and that is a realization that the whole thing was pointless or a waste of time, or that we've been deceived and lied to. And I'll give you a very quick example. Is the realization of what was going on in Afghanistan in particular is a great example of this, and in particular with the fall of Kabul and what has subsequently happened since then. And if anyone that's been to Afghanistan and have seen those conflicts, that's the thing that is really hard for people to comprehend. And the other thing that is a really important thing for me to add from a hashtag NA perspective, and arguably also, now I work closely with the TRB perspective, is that there is a lot of, in theory, a lot of support organizations out there, charitable organizations out there for the likes of military veterans and first responders. Maybe not so much first responders, but military veterans for sure. However, actually, there is a considerable strain that is put on, for example, dads who attend the birthing procedures of their children, and seeing what that looks like, and seeing what that does to the mother. I mean, the turmoil in that experience, the trauma in that experience, is only just kind of now being discussed, and it was pleased to hear that is now being considered, but we're not getting it right there. Another great example.
When my first grandchild was born, oh my gosh, my son literally looked green. When we went to the hospital to see the baby, he went, "Oh no, mum, no, it's the lighting." And you don't, and it must be a dreadful shock, because us women, we're sat there pushing and moaning with the pain, but anybody else sees the other end, and it's really not a pretty sight, and terrible to see someone you love is in so much pain. I feel passionate about new dads, actually, and I want to see far more done because I think dads can get postnatal depression, because 100%. You've had this woman all gorgeous and lovely and all looking forward to the baby comes, she may be not so well afterwards, she may have birth trauma, which is a real thing, and so he got it as well, but he's the man, he's the dad, he's the husband, and the baby's screaming all night, and you might get a month off with paternity leave, but then you've got to go back into work absolutely feeling dead from the neck down, and that you miss your dads, miss so much of a baby's growing up, and you've been at work maybe, or you've been away on a business trip while the child walks for the first time, and these are real key points in a child's life as they go through that change. And I want to see much more done for helping dads, because men aren't great at coming forward, are they? But I mean the suicide rate, do you do work over here with Papyrus, the suicide prevention people here?
No, so what there is many organizations that we've already reached out to in a very classic hashtag NA way. Actually, we actually do everything by handwritten letters and person to person, and in fact this call is arguably one of the first times I've ever spoken about what we do not in person. So and that's based on the connection that we have, and the fact that your good work was explained to me via the TRB. Actually, that's a shout out to Rachel, saying that you guys are doing a good job and it would be worthwhile speaking to you guys. But all these organizations in the UK, another great one's Andy's Men's Club. There's a whole range of organizations that we want to work with, but we have to do what we do in the background because of the complex nature of it. And we have to be able to then go with a package to deliver. That's the key thing. There's many people who are doing their own thing, and hey, there's some benefit to that to some extent. But at the same time, we really need to bring them all together, and that's what hashtag NA also is all about. It's saying these organizations, to band them together, that bring them together and provide them with a platform for the future of trauma reduction and trauma support. Not just for military and first responders. That's just where we're targeting at the moment specifically. But veterinarian carers, for example, people that work with animals, that's a significant challenge in its right, and we've got that on the radar. Parents of suicidal kids, that's another example. So there's a whole range of groups that we work on. Lorry drivers, I'll give you another really important one, actually, and a very, very good example. Is first of all police officers that go into their dream job and then after a year are leaving for whatever reason, but then they've got the trauma and psychological harm of what they've experienced, and also the realization that the police service was not for them. That we're seeing that in the fire sector now as well, and arguably I'm an example of that, frankly. And as well as that, if you take, for example, train drivers, yes, we know that there is a significant issue with train drivers experiencing suicides under the trains. But no one talks about the guys and girls that work on the platforms, on the stations, that see this happen. And that's another area of our work as well. So
that's a very good observation, Troy. That's a very good observation, because you think about, sadly, a very good friend of mine, her niece had terrible trauma. Everybody thought she was okay, but I threw herself in front of a train 3 days after Christmas last year, and I just, I mean, it must be horrific. But as you say, the other people that are standing there, around, either on the platform or she just literally threw herself in front of it mid, it wasn't at a station as such. She just did it. And I mean, other people on the train, the passengers, it just awful. I mean, because I know with the police service, they have been quite negligent with sorting out depression and suicide thoughts, because when you've got ordinary people like yourself, like me, the people that are looking at all the horrific child abuse images online with the Internet Watch Foundation, they have to have mandatorily the people that are looking at all these hideous, heinous things. They're ordinary mums and dads, and but they mandatorily have to have every 10 minutes in every hour, they have to have counselling. And rightly so, but I don't think it's been so picked up. That's if you work for the Internet Watch Foundation, but police officers are having to look at this stuff in their police station, in their offices. I don't think it was picked up so much how awful it is for those officers to then just go home. I think they're better at it now, but only really sort of recently in the last few years, because they had lost a lot of officers to suicidation and depression, where they couldn't come back, because it impacts you. It can't not. I mean, with your work, say like when you were a fire officer, firefighter, did you have what we would call supervision? I mean, did you have people you had to or could go and talk to, or suggested that you should because?
I would say, first of all, the word you said, negligent, is a great way of getting to the point. Lack of awareness and knowledge and skill is another example of words we could use. Lack of innovation is another example. And in theory, in the sector, yes, there is support, blue light champions, whatever that's supposed to mean. Firefighters to speak to other members of public, really. Yes, you might be in the fire sector, but you've not. I'll give you an example, and this is where Not Sam kind of came from. Okay, so I'll give you a real-time example, and this is specific to myself. So there are others that I worked with that would have seen this and been there, but hey, I'm going to share this experience, right? Got to decide which one I choose now. That's the reality of it. Let's use one that wouldn't be identifiable so easily in the newspaper. Okay, so an individual in a fire compartment, as we use, neutral plane down to the ground of the fire compartment on the first floor. It's a home of multiple occupancy. On arrival, we can see that the fire is fully developed, and we knew that one of the guys in the fire engines attending knew the area. Knew that this was going to be a high risk to an individual's life. So persons reported, which means that there's somebody in the building. And we had 3 appliances attending at least, possibly more in the first predetermined attendance PDA. But I'm pretty sure it was 3 in the first instance. Now, to skip over a lot of key aspects of this incident, one individual was found in the bathroom by myself under the shower, who had been affected by heat, is the best way of putting it. And to be honest, was pretty clearly dead. However, without going into details, a small indicator that there might have been life. There was a very, very subtle, small sign of life within that individual. And so I made the call, being the first to find the individual, that we were going to take that person out of the property. Now, here's a great example for you about negligence and lack of awareness around the trauma experienced by firefighters. When firefighters train in removing a casualty from a fire compartment, they train on a 20-kilogram dummy that doesn't slip, doesn't slide, doesn't really look all that human. And you can flip it around and throw it around, no biggie. When you're moving a human, probably weighing somewhere in the region of about 110 to 120 kilos at a guess, who's been affected by fire, that gets pretty gory. And it doesn't matter then, however many civilians you put into the blue light champion role, and that's sort of giving out, and you go and do a 2-day course about, talking about mental health and these things. You can speak to occupational health. Yeah, that's a fat load of use as well. Occupational health is there for sure to drive down the sickness and absence within these organizations. That's fine, but they aren't there really to provide you with mental health support. Shout out to the firefighters charity. When I spoke to them about my challenge in mental health at the time, I had immediate assistance from the crisis line, and then also within the next day, I had and started a direct therapy, which is an hour a week. Well, that's not just going to do the job. And the simple answer to the fact is I need to be able to pick up the phone and say to another firefighter who now works in firefighter mental health, hey man, the thing that's really getting to me is that in the process of trying to get into the first floor, the hose reel got jammed, and then some fool had turned the water off to the hose reel after we tested it. And then as we approached, like the angel fingers were the flame was moving throughout the neutral plane. We didn't think we was going to be able to penetrate around the corner. We did use some gas cooling. We were able to then get into the fire compartment. The bed was fully gone, so we could gauge roughly how much heat had been generated, approximately, not as in mathematical science, but in the context of that's a lot of fire is another way of putting it. The fire in the room is still a fire in the room. It wasn't a room on fire. So they're now thinking, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's not flashed over. These are technical scientific words, but in the fire and rescue service, this is just words we use every day. And for me to then say, yeah, I spotted the guy, I saw signs of life. However, he also looked pretty badly affected by heat. They know what that looks like. When I then said about what happened to that individual when we tried to drag that body out of that fire compartment, what that looked like when we was dragging him out, how that then came across to the individuals when they were trying to drag him down the stairs. But more importantly, the fact that there was very substandard operational debrief, no real learning that came from it. We submitted a whole host of work that never really went anywhere. The operational feedback loop was substandard. The individual that then attempted to carry out CPR didn't have access to the CPR masks because we don't have a very good chain of supply for medical provisions within the fire service. We actually beg, borrow, and steal from the ambulance service. That's the reality of that incident, minus the graphic gore. And for me to be able to say that to somebody that knows the language, and for them to say, yeah, got you, I know exactly what you're talking about, I understand, you have a reason and a right to be traumatized by that incident. And they even, we can't even talk to occupational health and talk about the difference between lay flat hose and hose reel. And we can't talk about the difference between fire compartment, neutral plane. They don't know that word. But there are thousands of firefighters that have gone through retirement over the last few years in particular. Another, very hot topic about the increased likelihood of exposure to trauma and psychologically damaging incidents in the fire sector. Well, all these firefighters that have now left, and they're still in good health, a lot of them still have a lot to give. And then now, they've left the sector after 30 years and they didn't even know what their pension was going to be because their pensions have been stolen away from them. I mean, if we want to talk about what has an adverse effect on the willingness for people to talk about the positives of the fire service, there's another one for you. And so all these people could be ideal candidates to not just go and learn about mental health provision within the fire sector, but to understand the complexity, the variables, the operational learning, to be able to also help and support their own mental health journey in the future.
Yeah,
and it's always,
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. I mean, there's so much work to be done, isn't there? I mean, I'm not being rude. How are you funded? I mean, did Nepal pay you to go over there, or what? I mean, are you a charity? Are you a community interest thing, or do you just, I mean, how do you, because all these things, you're now in America as I speak to you now. I mean, the flight from Nepal to America, all this stuff costs money. Are you funded by people?
Don't talk about the flight prices from Nepal to America. Holy moly. We had to buy 2 lots. That's even worse. Now we got to laugh about it or it would make your mental health go down, wouldn't it? So the answer to the question actually is I spent a considerable period of time as a homeowner. I bought a house at 20. I was then basically broke for best part of 19 years. Maybe not quite actually, because I'm now 36, so 16 years. So during that time, I just didn't have any money. I'll give you an example as well. Here's another example for you about, trauma that we don't talk about. I returned from Afghanistan for £4,000 in the bank. People used to go to Afghanistan because it was a big paycheck, 15 to 20 grand you'd come back with. When you're 19 years old, 20 years old, it sounds like a lot of money. I had a mortgage to pay. I'd got a mortgage just before, and so I had £4,000 in the bank. I came back, I could barely afford a car. I actually, I couldn't afford a holiday. So I spent a long time. I was still adamant I will travel. I spent a lot of time during my time in the military. When I was traveling, I was basically traveling overseas, mostly to Europe because it's cheap flights, and sleeping rough and broke into abandoned buildings and building sites and things like that. So I spent a lot of time still traveling. It was just in a slightly different way. Anyway, long story short, after being in the fire service, I lived on boats and I lived in vans and I lived in ways to try and not just be affordable, but to fill my time and to give me kind of reason for being not just a firefighter, but all this other stuff that I did. And during the process of my own personal mental health challenges, I was suicidal in my own home, as well as on fire stations, and just generally it was a high risk suicide ideation. And so it was a no-brainer to me that I had to get rid of the house. I was diehard that I will always keep a house, and that was my safety net. And actually I flipped it, and my safety net became the financial cash injection from the sale of my house. My reason for being is what I do now every day, and every hour of the day is fully committed now to my work. And so for me, the first funding that I got and received was my self-funding from the sale of my house. I'm very good at living very cheap, and I'm also very lucky that not only do I have a lot of good friends now dotted all over the world, but also people are passionate about helping out other people. And military and veterans are sick and tired of the attempts of providing mental health and physical support, and they want to see change. They're hungry for it. And so for me, to be able to go and visit these guys, part of my suicide ideation, and part of what led to being able to travel around and call myself not Ben, but you can call me Ben, is I'm going to come and see all the boys. I'm going to reconnect. I'm going to play Halo, drink beer, and have a good time. Now, I don't drink much beer. I really don't play on computer games, but the process and the concept was there. And so I now go around to people's places as much as I can. And yes, I sleep on a lot of sofas, but I also, accommodation is cheaper in Nepal. Whilst in Nepal, all of it was my own expense. All of it's my own expense. But I'll give you another example. We've arguably, #NA has been the only, out of all of the organizations worth millions of pounds, arguably billions of pounds, the only organization to respond to the Gen Z riots and the killings on the streets and the death on the streets from all sides was #NA. And we've delivered emergency first aid and trauma in a culturally appropriate way, and casualty stabilization, which is often overlooked, whilst including the trauma aspect of this. To over 250 people in Pokhara alone, one city, the tourist capital, not just of Nepal, but actually the Himalayas. We've delivered over 500 trauma kits, and we have kind of 3 different classifications for that. Class A trauma kits come in packs of 5 or 6. This means that an individual with a pack of 4 or 5 Class A trauma kits can respond to over 10 amputations and catastrophic hemorrhages, as well as somewhere in the region of about 40 to 50 gunshot wounds and stab injuries and lacerations, bricks, that type of thing. We don't identify individuals, whether they are from the rioters or the police. For us, it's just a simple answer that no one should be dying on the street, pure and simple. And we also are influencing and trying to encourage firearms officers and police officers to not just carry a tourniquet and bandage for themselves, which is the current standard model, but for them to carry a secondary as well for the person that perhaps they've shot because they felt it was necessary, or for the other person beside them that's been stabbed or injured. And kind of the idea and concept is that if you're a firearms officer and you shoot into a crowd, the very next thing that you should be doing is then provide life-saving first aid to those individuals. And the cost implication for that was less than £1,000. So we're aware that for a lot of large charity organisations, it's about £3 out of every £100 donated goes to the end user. For us, it's actually a cost to us. So that's under £1,000 of cost come out of my pocket. But the scale and scope of what we've achieved because of the efforts, the capabilities of the individuals, the training, the kind of package delivered is, that would have cost tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds to have delivered that through a standard charity. And so we do that. I'll spend every penny to my name if I have to prove that we are honest, we're trusted, we are capable. All of that equipment, apart from tinfoil blankets, like emergency blankets, were purchased in Nepal. We actually stripped the shelves of Kathmandu and Pokhara of first aid kits to then be able to redistribute them. They're no good in a shop. First aid kits themselves are actually pretty useless. We just wanted the bags, and we then filled them with bandages and tourniquets, mostly improvised tourniquets. Every single package was identical. Every one of them has been serialized, and every one of them is now traceable and accountable. And the whole city of Pokhara is now covered. We have operators now in Kathmandu who are ready to do the same again, and we can now generate this remote. We've actually also developed a whole new bandage / tourniquet 2-in-1 combo, which once you see it, it's an absolute no-brainer. It's remarkably simple, and it's a game changer. It also contributes to other things as well as being a tourniquet and bandage. It also helps in stabilizing an injury like a broken leg, acting as a support for a splint and this type of thing. So this is without doubt, world-leading stuff, and it costs less than £1,000.
Absolutely. I mean, when you say we, how big is your team? Or I mean, are you just recruiting all the time?
So it's flexible and dynamic. I'll give you another example. Actually, in June, I returned to the UK. Mid-June, I'll be returning to the UK to join a team of guys that have been working very, very hard in the UK. Their specific area of interest is trying to build a national food share campaign to bring various food banks together to be able to then share resources and distribute food better. But actually, that's the shop front for what is also safe spaces and refuges, as well as also trying to help people who have gambling problems and debt problems and this sort of thing. It's all about poverty reduction. So there's a team there.
Yeah, I mean, I know another organisation I know well is Mankind. I don't know if you've heard of them. And Mankind is really the only charity in the country that deals with men that are in domestic abuse, and they have so few safe spaces to go to. And I think I heard from Mark Brooks, am I right in saying the fire stations sometimes put them up?
Right. So this is that is true. So you can report to a fire station as a safe space, and this is another core theme to what I now do. So part of the reason for being in Nepal in America, and I've just returned from a suicide prevention week in America, hosted by 22 Mohawks. And just for information, I've just pinged you an image to your WhatsApp. You can get that up on screen. Or share a link, but it's called 22 Mohawks. This is an organization in America that is all about building a social network with military veterans and first responders, and I'm working now on sharing their message on a global platform. These groups, some smaller than others, some quite big, they do great work, but a big part of what we have to do is be able to provide safe spaces and what I refer to as safe spaces and rendezvous points. And we're now generating that across the globe. So at the moment, right now, I'm traveling the coastline between Tallahassee and New Orleans to identify safe spaces and refuges. And that could be anything from an individual that is a barber, who's just a good person, that's, just chops hair for a living and does a good job of it and provides you with a cup of tea and a smile, through to a cafe or restaurant, you name it. That's what we refer to as a safe space where you can go and just have a smile and a cup of tea. We've also
I might just missed you saying something. You said, because you've written down on some of your info that you gave me about remember the 22. Is that just what you were talking about? 22.
Yeah, so that's 22 Mohawks. Yeah, so 22 Mohawks. So this goes back to what we were saying before. If we want to talk about the reality of death in war, I think the numbers are around about 4,800 military personnel died in Afghanistan. Somewhere in the region of 145,000 Afghan era veterans have committed suicide in America since 2001. My work specifically is kind of around that Afghan and Iraq generation. You know, if we look at the Vietnam generation is a similar, you know, arguably it's quite different, but I kind of put it also alongside the Northern Ireland, Kosovo, Bosnia generation in the UK. You know, that these guys have been theoretically had access to mental health charities and veteran charities for a very long time, and yet sadly, you know, in America, they have a good gauge-ish of the number of veterans that have committed suicide. We don't have that in the UK. I can give you an example. You know, this has been on my radar for a long time. It's quite well known now that more veterans from Afghanistan commit suicide following on from as opposed to numbers of people that got killed in Afghanistan. The numbers in the UK is just shy of 500 serving personnel got killed in Afghanistan. But what a lot of people don't know is when that number actually surpassed the number of those killed in the conflict. And actually, it's one of the few things I have on my Facebook. It's from way back when. It was actually around about 2014 that happened. So we can't keep talking about the fact that more people have committed suicide than died in Afghanistan. What we have to be saying is in 2014, there were more suicides than ever got killed during the conflict. And so actually, it's far worse than that. And sorry, but let's hold some people accountable for a second.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Terrible at actually reporting and recording suicides. Those numbers are very, very difficult to find. And it's a similar kind of concept from the military as well. It's very hard to find the number of suicides in the military. If we want to talk about suicides in the military, let's talk about Gunnar Beck. You know, do some research on that. Anyone that's listening, you know, there's just one example. Let's not also forget that only 3 years before Gunnar Beck, there was a gunner from the same unit that also commits suicide. Let's just be a little bit accountable for the fact that this is a thing. And for whatever reason that suicide happened, it happened. Let's see the results. Let's see what's happening to change that. And then at the same time, you know, let's reflect on the fact that no one talks about the numbers of people that attempted suicide and subsequently survived that suicide attempt and now have catastrophic injuries, inability to move, talk, you know, eat, these types of things. This happens when people do this, you know. As well as that, let's talk about the suicide bereavement and talk about those that have, you know, experienced the bereavement of suicide. And Suicide Bereavement UK does a good job of trying to support the bereavement of suicides who are successful.
The thing is, I think people, when you got this, I mean, people feel, oh, if only I'd said this, if only I've done that. But having looked down that pit, I look back now, talking to you now, I look back and think, golly, I felt I was doing everyone a favor because, you know, my children had been abused by this friend of mine. I'd had 19 years of domestic abuse. And I just thought, because I was mentally unwell, that this would just make everyone's lives better. And when people go on about, oh, it's selfish, it isn't selfish. That it isn't selfish. It's a mindset. It's a state of health, poor health, that it just makes sense that, as you say, you have no money. Debt causes a lot of problems, doesn't it? People, and there's a lot of shame. I mean, I lost everything because of what happened to my children. I was missold insurance. It wasn't that I was useless with money, but there's a lot of shame in all this stuff. And mental health, there's still a terrible lot of stigma about it. I mean, what I wanted to ask you as well is, there's something you put in one of your things here. You were going on about one of 3 ecosystems you've created, and you gave, I just wanted to know what this meant. You put TFCCGG. What does that mean? Yeah,
so it goes back a little bit to the question you said earlier about how big is your team. I have and generate teams for various things. We actually, at 22 Mohawks, for example, and hence why you see this wonderful Mohawk, it's a way of showing visual signs to support the 22. We actually recognized something there, and we generated on the spot, out of the people attending, we generated a team, 7 mostly, but at one point we had an extra 2.5 because one of them was only about 9 years old. So we called her a half. But we generated a team to carry out a review specifically focusing on the mental health and the physical health of people that were attending that incident at that session, to help then generate a report to pass that on to the organizations that run the 22 Mohawks X35 events. And so the reason why I give you that as an example is we are hyper dynamic in bringing people together in teams across the world. And the reason we can do that is because we look for professionally capable, professionally curious individuals who are committed to our work. So that team was a team of 7 individuals, myself and 6 others, who were looking at specifically the provision of first aid following on from parachuting and the injury sustained and the trauma and the psychological well-being of the people that were there experience. And the reason why everyone does that is because they're all first aiders, and they're not just first aid at work trained, right? These guys are combat medics, EMTs, firefighters, are passionate about what we do. And so that was a team that was started, and within 2 days it was closed down, and we got the results, and that's that. And we'll present that to the organization. So that's the dynamics of what we do.
Brilliant.
And so
I mean,
that is TFCCGG through and through. So what TFCCGG stands for, and that's one of the other ecosystems I mentioned, is a global group of communities connected, specifically focused on one task. So task focused community connections group global. It started as TFC, but actually it's about saying, like, it does not matter where in the globe you are. We group together. It's a group of organizations or a group of individuals that are professionally curious and professionally capable. And we're able to then come together as a community. We're connected based on a specific task. Another example of this could be, for example, subsurface casualties in the UK is a significant issue, problem, and also, frankly, egg on the face of the UK Fire and Rescue Service and generally the UK, because we do not have a subsurface capability to look for casualties that have gone subsurface. And this has a direct connotation to myself and members of the fire and rescue sector across the country. Now in Nepal, they have an armed police force, which is also the rescue team, and they have rescue divers. And so these guys have a fantastic, like, Nepal to a lot of people is a developing country, but in the context of subsurface casualties within the fire and rescue sector, or within the rescue sector, are leading the way on this now. And actually, there's a video. It's quite comical because everything was back in the 60s, right, in the 70s. But the UK had subsurface dive teams in the 70s. So why the hell do we not have them now? And why is it now that when somebody goes subsurface, we use the 30-60-90 model, and we basically kind of write them off, that's not savable life? Try telling that to the parents of the children and the firefighters, and that links back to trauma in the sector. And so what TFCCGG is about saying, like, any organization anywhere on planet Earth that we can find that will focus on the task of subsurface casualties, we'll bring them together. And this TFCC UKFRS will be getting launched in September, October time this year in the UK, where they'll be traveling all over the UK to specifically focus on a task. Firefighters' mental health will be one of them. The mental health of firefighters' family and friends will be another. Subsurface casualties will be yet another. And so we just bring these teams together. So we have the ability to flex from hundreds of people to thousands of people to just 5 or 6 people, but actually put together tangible results, which is shared over the border and not limited by what.
Oh, you've frozen.
Within the UK fire rescue.
Oh, right. I mean, I'm going to ask you this. I know you're probably I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you, do you ever take a day off?
No.
Do you ever have time?
Not anymore. No, we, myself, highly driven.
Oh, you're breaking up a bit. You're breaking up. I hope we're not going to lose you.
And that is our.
I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, no, we don't.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? All right, that's fine.
Hello.
Well, I just have to explain. He's in a motel somewhere in the back end of America. That's why the signal's not so great. But, you know, I read somewhere the other day, and I'm saying this for your benefit, because as you've had all, suicide ideation and all of that, I mean, you have to watch yourself, don't you, that what could be your trigger points, and be aware of what you are putting yourself through, and be aware maybe just to take a break. Because I was listening the other day to someone, he'd written a book about the brain and the aspects of the brain, and the bits I really caught onto was we have our executive brain, which is what you're very heavily into at the moment, but we also have our creative brain. Now, if we sit for 15 minutes a day quietly in the countryside or on a park bench or whatever, not thinking about anything, but in that 15 minutes, your creative brain's impact power has improved by the output by 50%, 50%. That's a lot. So I would suggest it might be in your best interest to sometimes take that and, 15 minutes just to sit quietly amongst nature, where you're doing Nepal, you're surrounded by it, aren't you? And just realize that's what this guy was saying from the book he wrote, that your creative brain's output increases by 50%. That is significant. That's significant because it's embedded into my day to day. I mean, there's a couple of things there. One, people say you can't help other people if you're not fixed yourself. That's not true. Not true at all. If you've got capability to help other human beings, for God's sake, go and help other human beings. Like what a positive thing. Exactly. I mean, honestly, Troy, when I was getting over a nervous breakdown, I still helped other people, and I found things that made me realize I was brought up a Catholic. I'm not anymore, but I was brought up a Catholic, and we were always taught there's always someone worse than you, and it's true. So when I was having my breakdown, I thought, well, I'm not dying, and I went to work. I've worked in 3 or 4 hospices with those that are dying, and I tell you, it was the best tonic I could have done to take me out of my own dilemma. What I'm going to do now, because we are sadly coming, I can't believe how fast this has gone. What is my last question to you? How can people support you and get involved? How can they help you, either financially or whatever? How can they get in touch with you?
So there's two real areas here, and the first thing I'll quickly add is goes back a little bit to what you just said there as well. I want you to if you haven't watched it for a while, take a watch of the first few seconds of the movie Gladiator. Really powerful movie in its own right, but just watch the first bit. You've got this guy who's an absolute warrior. Every guy my age knows about this movie, of course. But the first little bit is you just see that little bird. That is enough to reset someone's day. And hashtag NA, it's available to everybody. Get a piece of paper. We ask for it to be plain paper. It could be a piece of cardboard. White is the preference. Get a fridge freezer. Go and get a TV and spray paint the thing white. And write on the side of it the circle and the hashtag inside that and NA in the middle of that. It's not applicable. It doesn't matter whether you are a suicide sufferer or you're in an act of remembrance for those that are suffering or those that have suffered and subsequently chosen to end their lives. Go and do something with it. Take it for a walk. Go to Ben Nevis. Hashtag responsibly, as we like to say. But that's the first thing you can do to get involved. Go and be that guy. We are all warriors, like women, men, mums. It doesn't matter if you've been in the military. You've got an incredibly hard life. We know that. We know cost of living crisis. We know that houses are too small in the UK. Jobs are limited. People don't respect each other anymore. We've lost our culture. We know life is difficult. And you mentioned just now that there's always people in a worse position than you. But on behalf of suicide sufferers, their lives are pretty shit. Like that's the reality. And that's it's important to say that to people. Like we recognize that in your world, it's a terrible existence for you to be in right now. But go and look at that bird in the trees. Go and take that piece of paper, take a picture, send it to your family, send it to yourself. Make a little journey, share that journey. And at some point, there'll come a time where you'll be able to share it with me, with the organization, with somebody else, where you can just say, hey, today I went here. I've actually been to a number of the spots I was planning on committing suicide, and I waved 22 Mohawks flag, but hey, I am walking, talking, hashtag NA, right? So,
well, honestly,
go back and take that. Take
someone in my ear going,
and build up a little timeline, and then finally, you mentioned about how people can support and contribute. We don't ask for financial support right now. We don't operate on any social media right now. We only deliver handwritten letters person to person at this time. There will come a time where we will be able to do that. But we have to manage our growth and how successful we are. And so
definitely.
what I would say is the thing that I need people to do is to stay alive. You have to stay alive.
Right. Exactly. Life is worth living. It's been truly, Troy, it's been an absolute honor, privilege, and you're very inspirational, that people, get up there and get onto something. The person next door, whatever, give someone a smile today, whatever, make someone's life worth living. And, hugely inspirational. I thank you enormously for coming on the show. I hope you've enjoyed it, and got out there what you're doing, and it's brilliant work. And I thank you for it. It's wonderful. So have a good weekend wherever you are in America at the moment. I don't know, where are you? Still in Florida, maybe? I don't know. But have I will be back in touch with you. I'll be in touch with you. And thank you so much.
Thanks, Marilyn.
Thank you. Bye now. Well, the amazing Troy. I'm always quite shocked. I didn't know quite what to expect, and wow, that is unpacked so much more than I thought that he did. And how inspirational is that? And what a great message of hope, which we always want to end on in this show, that, help someone stay alive. You've got it in you to go and help somebody else. So please do so. And next week, I will be interviewing someone from my own world. I'll be interviewing James Wilding, who is a very, very much respected principal of a school, involved in the Independent Schools Association, and I've known him a long time, and he runs an amazing school. And I think we do need to talk about education in this country at the moment. So please tune in, and hopefully go on Unprecedented TV and find the shows. There's a lot to look at there. So it's Marilyn Hawes signing off from Heart and Soul with Unprecedented TV. Thank you.